You're tuned in to True Crime Stories.
In May 2000, 4 British businessmen handed over a £10 note and walked away with a car company. Not a small one. The last domestically owned mass-production car maker in Britain, with a factory in Longbridge, Birmingham, and roughly 6,500 workers on the payroll. The German owners, BMW, were so desperate to be rid of it that they threw in a £427 million interest-free loan, plus a warehouse full of unsold cars, as what the press called a dowry. The 4 men became known as the Phoenix Four. John Towers, the former Rover chief executive who fronted the deal; Peter Beale, an accountant; Nick Stephenson, an engineer; and John Edwards, a Rover dealership owner. They were photographed beaming outside the Longbridge gates, hailed as the men who had saved British motoring from a German fire sale. The Transport and General Workers Union backed them. The Department of Trade and Industry backed them. The British public backed them. The alternative bidder, a private equity firm called Alchemy Partners, had wanted to shrink Rover to a small sports car operation and shed thousands of jobs. Phoenix promised the opposite. Volume production, full employment, a revival. What actually happened over the next 5 years is a case study in how a company can be hollowed out from the inside, while everyone watching congratulates the people doing it. The Phoenix Four bought MG Rover for £10. Almost immediately, they began restructuring it. By the time the company collapsed, the original car business sat at the bottom of a corporate pyramid containing 33 separate companies, most of them legally distinct from MG Rover Group itself. The structure mattered because it determined where the money flowed. When MG Rover sold a car, revenue passed through this web before it reached the operating company that paid the workers. Profitable assets, the customer loan book, the property, the financing arm, were quietly moved into companies the 4 directors personally controlled or co-owned. Losses stayed with MG Rover Group. Pensions stayed with MG Rover Group. The factory and the workforce stayed with MG Rover Group. One of those new companies was called MGR Capital. It was set up in 2001 as a joint venture with the Royal Bank of Scotland to take over the customer loan book. Essentially, the stream of monthly payments from people who had financed their Rovers. The pensions regulator would later argue that this loan book could just as easily have been bought by MG Rover Group itself, where the cash would have helped fund the workers' pensions. Instead, it was acquired by an entity that benefited the directors. Then there was Studley Castle, a country house in Warwickshire purchased through a Phoenix subsidiary and used as a corporate retreat. There was a consultancy arrangement that paid more than £1.6 million in the 15 months leading up to the collapse to a Dr. Chu Lee, who was in a personal relationship with director Nick Stephenson. There was Project Platinum, the internal name for the disposal of the loan book, which the auditors at Deloitte advised on while simultaneously serving as auditors to the parent company. Across the 5 years, the 4 directors and managing director Kevin Howe extracted approximately £42 million in salaries, pensions, dividends, and benefits. The company never made a profit, not once. Sales peaked in 2001 at around 170,000 cars, then declined every year after. By 2004, the cash was running out. The Department of Trade and Industry knew it. Internal reviews concluded MG Rover would run out of money by early 2005 without an external partner. Talks began with the Chinese manufacturer SAIC, Shanghai Automotive. The British government arranged emergency bridge financing. On April 8, 2005, The talks collapsed. SAIC walked. The administrators were called in. 6,000 workers were told the factory was closing. They received roughly £3,400 each in statutory redundancy. Their pension fund went down with the company. Creditors were owed close to £1.3 billion. The day after the government announced an inquiry, Peter Beale installed software called Evidence Eliminator on his laptop. The investigation took 4 years and cost taxpayers £16 million. When inspectors Gervais McGregor and Guy Newey QC finally published their report in September 2009, it ran to 897 pages. It concluded that the director's remuneration had been unreasonably large and out of all proportion. It documented the asset transfers, the conflicts of interest, the consultancy payments, and the data destruction. It found that Beale had given untruthful evidence in interviews and inaccurate and misleading testimony to a parliamentary select committee back in 2004. And then, nothing much happened. The Serious Fraud Office reviewed the findings and declined to open a criminal investigation. The complex corporate structure the Phoenix Four had built, with the help of expensive professional advisors, was, in the technical sense, legal. Money had moved between companies that the directors were entitled to operate. Decisions had been signed off by auditors. The web held. In 2011, 6 years after the collapse, the four men accepted voluntary disqualification from acting as company directors. 3 years for John Edwards, 5 years each for Towers and Stephenson, 6 years for Beale. They kept the £42 million. Deloitte was fined £14 million by the Financial Reporting Council in 2013 for failing to manage conflicts of interest. A record fine for a UK accountancy firm at the time, later partially overturned on appeal. In 2014, the regulator clawed back roughly £8 million from MGR Capital toward the senior pension scheme. The trust fund the directors had publicly pledged to set up for redundant workers, valued at up to £50 million at the time of the collapse, never delivered the sums promised. What the inspectors actually documented beneath the 897 pages was a pattern. A failing company can be made to enrich the people running it, even as it sinks, if the corporate architecture is complicated enough that no single transaction looks indefensible on its own. The losses pool in one place, the profits pool in another. Each individual decision passes a smell test. The cumulative effect is that workers lose their jobs, their pensions, and their futures, and 4 men retire to comfortable lives. And the law, examining the structure piece by piece, finds nothing it can call a crime. If you had been a Longbridge worker reading that report in 2009, watching the men who built the structure walk away with their fortunes intact, what would you have wanted the law to do that it couldn't? If this kind of detailed look at how financial structures get used and misused is what you come here for, subscribe. There's a full playlist of cases like this one waiting.